Hey, it's me, Rob Wright. I'm dropping another fantastic Entrepreneurial Thinkers episode into your feed this week. And today we're talking all things venture capital. All right, if you're in the technology sector of our economy or the startup world, you think about and talk about and are curious about and want access to venture capital all the time. And we talk about all of that today with Paige Hendrix Buckner, the CEO of iconic women investing organization, Allraise. And we talk about not just venture capital in general terms, we talk about it through the lens of trying to get more women into the investor VC private equity community, trying to get the women that are in the VC private equity community to rise up the ranks and take more of the decision-making capacity. Because when we help create systems and institutions that put more women in charge of the distribution of capital into our entrepreneurial economies, that means that the greater likelihood of women, non-binary folks, people of color, getting that money distributed to them so that they can build their entrepreneurs' dreams and they can build local businesses in your local communities goes up. Right, so we discuss and dissect all of that today with Paige in a high energy, very specific, very thoughtful conversation that I hope you enjoy as much as we did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to maybe your first time, Entrepreneurial Thinkers. This is the show where I get the privilege to have weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together very intentionally to try to use these conversations to leave the world a little bit better than we found it before the conversation. Today, I am really honored, very excited to be joined by Paige Hendrix Buckner, CEO at Allraise. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we welcome her into the show. Paige isn't just quietly reshaping who gets to hold power in tech and who gets to write the checks. She's actually helping rewrite a new future-forward chapter in an iconic organization in the world of women investing by reshaping Allraise to adapt to this ever-changing landscape of the private capital markets that we live in. Having been lucky enough to have had a long conversation with her prior last year when we first met, I can say she's really, to me, the epitome of what I think an entrepreneurial thinker is. She's a proud Mizzou Tiger and a Portlander. She's a data and people-driven leader who understands that sustainable evolution really only comes when the data paints a picture that people can then get excited to believe. She's been on the front lines of equity and opportunity movements from inside startups like Client Joy, TIE for Young Entrepreneurs, Teach for America, and local county government, even in Oregon. And she's turned all of that into this level of experience and perspective that is now reshaping the private capital industry. She's not just building a global community, she's really rewiring the rules of access, influence, and confidence for thousands of women and non-binary leaders. Today's conversation isn't just about like hype or headlines, it's about how we should really think about who distributes capital to whom and why that actually matters to all of our economy. So with that, I say, welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers Page. It's great to see you again.
It is so great to see you. I think this is the best intro I've ever received. It like pulled out nuggets that I haven't thought about in a long time. Fantastic, Rob. Winning all the awards.
Thank you. My pleasure. And before we get on to our first question, we got to shout out Megan Stevenson Krause.
Of course.
If not for Megan Stevenson Krause, who listeners of our show, viewers of our show know that Megan is an alum of our show. We call you guys alumni once you come on the show, because you're not just a very transactional guest. We build relationships. We help you succeed later, long after the show is over. And Megan was the one who shouted out and said, like, you and Paige have to meet each other first and foremost. It wasn't like you got to get her on the show. It was like, you two should know each other. And our prior conversation very much validated that to be true. You are stuck with me for life in your corner.
Done, Rob. Same.
And today is just a great opportunity, thanks to Megan's encouragement, for us to have this conversation and share it with our audience. Because at the end of the day, the show is really just me and my curiosities about things that really interesting, smart people are working on, kind of as a proxy for our audience, right? Which is this cross section of entrepreneurs, investors, but also government leaders, private sector employees, executives, aspiring entrepreneurs, academics, all kinds of people listen to the show to try and find, one, a knowledge base around what is actually going on and how are people thinking about the things that they're obsessed about, like you, and what we're going to talk about today that they're not aware of. But then also, two, just kind of how can they pull lessons and best practices from people in other sectors or segments of society or industry to apply to their own work and think like, how can I think and approach my work more entrepreneurially to try and build a better version of whatever it is that I obsess about, right? So super grateful for you to be here. Thank you.
Thanks,
I love your background. Everybody on the show, we're going to miss your dog because your dog was with us pre-show, so we're going to miss that.
He's a celebrity, but he belongs in another room while we're recording.
Yes.
So
he could be doing his own podcast right now. So here's the
Actually,
scoop.
yes.
Here's the scoop. This is the first question, and then we're going to jump into a deeper conversation. Why is it important that we all should have access to private capital and not just like old dudes that look like me from very specific universities or states?
I think it's a great place to start because I want to clarify that the kind of capital we're talking about, specifically with All Raise, we're talking about venture capital, is not right for every business. And that doesn't mean that people shouldn't have access to it, but you first need to determine whether or not it's the right tool to help grow your business. And having started my own business and been through the experience of trying to raise capital, anytime you think about injecting some kind of resource into the thing that you're building, you have to ask, is this the right thing for the stage, for the sector, for me as a business owner? And so when I think about venture capital, it is a tool to help businesses grow really fast and get to market and beat out their competitors. And you have not just the actual money itself, but also the resources, for example, the venture firms or the angels who invest in you, who are trying to help you connect to the right talent, right? To connect to the right customers, to continue to grow your brand and credibility. And so I think the first question is, what kind of capital do you need to grow your business? And if it is venture capital, we want to see a diversity of folks who are accessing this capital, who are deploying this capital, because it means that we are then investing in solutions that are relevant to our broader population.
Yeah.
And especially in this moment, we need solutions that scale quickly, that are, I think, good for people and planet. And I think we have a really exciting opportunity to do that if we have more diversity of thought in the room on both sides of the table, which is the VC side of the table and the founder side of the table.
I love that. And you perfectly segue us right into kind of the deeper part of the conversation, right? Like I've known All Raise as an organization. Many of the people, if not most of the people that will listen to this, will know of it from its kind of history. Why reshape its purpose right now?
Little context about All Raise, and I'm happy to answer that question. So All Raise is a nonprofit that when we first started was here to help investors, founders, and operators be successful, and specifically women and non-binary folks. Since I've stepped into the seat as the CEO back in 2023, we made the choice with all of our programming beginning in 2024 to focus on women and non-binary VCs. And that was really for two reasons. One, that was the strongest network that we had. And number two, we knew that if we can increase the kind of representation when it comes to gender on the VC side of the table, we're going to see more women and non-binary folks getting funded on the other side of the table. And so as we embarked on our journey for All Raise, the reason we decided to narrow our focus was because we wanted to maximize our impact.
Yeah, I noticed.
And as a nonprofit, you have to focus on your vision, your mission, and your impact. And so that was one of the big drivers behind that decision to narrow our focus and how we've narrowed our focus.
Yeah, I loved it. And we had touched on this previously when we first met each other. And then as I was doing the research to prepare for today's conversation, I noticed like kind of a repetitive phrase like, hey, if we shrink our programming, if we narrow our service offerings, if we focus on fewer of things that we used to try and do for everybody all the time, every day, like we're actually seeing in the data that we're going to have a greater impact. So that it's already a testament to the strategic decisions we're seeing it play out in the tactical level, which is awesome to see. I mentioned in the intro, right? Like I think, my words, like I think you're a prototype entrepreneurial thinker, kind of the modern version of this entrepreneurial thinking executive, no matter what the capacity or the industry that you're working in. What is it about you? This is tough self-reflection, I know, right out of the gate, right? But what is it about you? What do you think about yourself that is well suited to rethink like a relatively successful organization, quote unquote, already inside of an industry that your work is actually reimagining the industry simultaneously. Like, what traits or what energy do you bring to this page that is like, wow, this is really a good fit for me, and I can see where my skill sets prior like have led to this?
So when I think about my mission, my vision, what I'm really passionate about in the world, it is rooted in three buckets. Number one is community. I love being in community with other people who are passionate about what they're building, even if it isn't exactly the same thing. Being adjacent to learning from people who are working in different industries, and then building community with those people helps you really learn. And some of my best key takeaways have been from folks who are in very different spaces, but being in community with them, having strong relationships with them, getting to know them as human beings, and then collaborating with them when it makes sense. I think number two is my deep curiosity in anything that I'm doing. And so I spend quite a bit of time every day reading about the industry and talking to people about the industry in addition to doing my day job. And that's important because I am not our community members. I am not a venture capitalist. I have not been a venture capitalist. I have been a founder. So I understand that perspective. But it is important to stay close to the people for whom you are building and to be curious about them. And so it's one of the reasons why I love venture capital. It's so filled with curious people who are really interested in all of these solutions that are being built at the various stages and the impacts that they'll make on the world, the founders who are building them. It's a really great space to be in. And the third piece for me is about narrative. And we talk about it in the context of lore at All Raise. And so what are the stories that we tell ourselves about who can be successful, what success looks like, and how are we pattern matching against those stories?
Wow.
And when I first came to All Raise as the chief of staff, I couldn't unsee how all of these things show up. We have an incredible community, people who are willing to not just do their day jobs and then have very full personal lives, but also give their time to this organization to help other people be successful. We have a spectacular group of teammates and board members and volunteers who are genuinely curious about what it's going to take to change the industry for the better for everyone. And then finally, we have all these incredible stories that we get to tell. And I think we've really just hit the tip of the iceberg there. So with that, I would say I'm the perfect leader for this moment in this time. And I always think about, there's a wonderful leader that I really admire, Seema Sistani. She has run 2 incredible companies, and she's now teaching a class about leadership. And what I heard her say is that any CEO is renting their seat. And I feel like I am renting this seat, right? I think I'm the right person for this moment in this time. And I feel really grateful to be here because it's a chance to weave together my interests with the work that we're doing and I hope have a small impact on the venture capital industry, but also the world as a whole.
Leave it better than you found it, right? There you go, right? That's a beautiful way to think about your job, right? And it's one of those, I've used the phrase a lot in the last 5 years for some reason or another, but like this idea of I get to do this versus I have to.
I get to do this.
The get to versus have to, right? Like
truly.
I mean, whether that's in your personal, like, hey, man, I get to be alive today. I get to interact with these people. Or, hey, there's parts of my job that I might not love that I have to do, but like I get to do that. Like I get this opportunity. So I can feel that in the way that you describe yourself.
I get to do this. Yeah. Yes. It doesn't mean that the job's easy, by the way. I want to be clear about that. I think I get, and even on the days where things are challenging, whether I'm having a tough conversation with a stakeholder or having to make a really difficult decision, I get to make this choice right now. Yeah. And on the days that are tough, I try to ground myself in the I get to do this.
Hey, trust me, I come up with this stuff mostly because I'm looking in the mirror.
You need to say it to yourself.
It's 100%. Trust me. This is not like wisdom for others, right? It starts here. See, here's an interesting thing. I've noticed this over the last decade. It presented itself to me as I was doing the preparation for the show. So many of I'll call them entrepreneurial support organizations, right? So that's a big, huge, wide umbrella in our entrepreneurial economy that you and I play in, are run by women, like inside the U.S., outside the U.S., it didn't matter. So in your opinion, like what's then been the disconnect between that part of our entrepreneurial economy and say the investor side of our entrepreneurial economy where, as we're going to discuss in more detail later, like not enough women are running the firms owning the firms, making the decisions at the final decisions at the firms?
When I saw this question that you shared with me,
Okay, first of all, by the way, brownie points for being a prepared guest. Like, thank you.
Listen, I'm trying to, the audience doesn't need to see this, but I wrote out my answers and bullet points.
This is what we love about curious people.
Massive nerd. So when I saw this question, what immediately came to mind, so on the venture side, I'm actually peeling these two things apart for just a quick second.
Please.
I think first of all, venture is a relatively small industry and a relatively small asset class, right? And so when you begin there and you realize how tiny it is, and when we were looking at the universe of VCs, for example, last year, as we were looking at the number of women and non-binary folks in decision-making roles, the ballpark number of people in partner plus roles was around 10,000. It's pretty small, right? It's a pretty small industry that has a really big impact. So I think when you look at any industry that's getting started or is small, it's typically rooted in these networks of who you know, and then you just keep exponentially building upon that. And venture capital is very rooted in some very clear networks and continue to double down on themselves, right? So where you went to school, which accelerator you were in, which firm you were in, and that just continues. And so as I've been thinking about venture capital, what I want to call it is I don't think when this all got started, it was, I'm intentionally excluding people, though the systems that we live within have already built in bias based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and a variety of others, class. So those pieces were already there, but over time, as it built itself, it just continued to double down on those systems, those networks, the who you know. Yeah. And I think a big part of that, and we ran in this very exciting strategy tour over the last couple of years to really talk with folks, is because venture is such a high trust business. You share deals with people you know, people you trust, people that you want to do business with. And often that trust is rooted in networks where you've had a chance to build those relationships, whether directly with somebody or through proxy, because, I trust you because we were in the same class, we have mutual friends. And so I think the opportunity here, and I've seen this happening across venture capital since I've stepped into the space and then now in this role, is that is shifting as people become aware that their networks have limited the opportunity that they have access to and what they could have access to if they expanded their personal friend group and then their work friend group or their work network.
Yeah. I love that.
Very superficial answer here.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's not superficial. I mean, it's big picture, but it is
big picture. Right. It's very big picture.
Because what we're doing is we're unpacking, sorry to interrupt, like we're unpacking in one part, essentially an industry that, like, if we all roughly agree, let's just say, like, from a United States perspective, this asset class, this industry was born like 1968 to 1972, like somewhere in there in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Okay. So we're unpacking something that's essentially like my age, like 57, 58 years old. And we're saying, now, maybe in this last 10 to 15-ish years, 20 on the outer edges, like we're beginning to start to make change. It's going to take a couple, nobody wants to admit this. It's going to take a few generations. It might not take like 312 years, but it might take another 30 or 40 or 50 years to start to bring it up to levels of equity, if not like total equality. And that progress is hugely important, which we're going to highlight some of in some of the rest of the conversation. But sorry, please continue. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Plaintext Capital. Investing in Web3 and cryptocurrencies isn't about jumping on the latest trends. It's about understanding where the market is headed and why. Plaintext Capital is a digital asset investment firm focused on long-term strategies backed by deep research, backing the best Web3 companies and protocols, and investing in the newest asset classes of the future. They believe that Web3 crypto will drive digital innovation for decades to come, creating significant value for investors. In fact, their team of highly skilled professionals work with institutions and serious individual investors who want clarity in a space full of hype and noise. So if you're looking to cut through the chaos and invest with purpose, Plaintext Capital brings a disciplined, high-conviction approach to investing. You can learn more and meet the team at plaintextcapital.com.
No. I think as you're talking, I think the finer point that I'll put on that, what I'll say is that venture capital is a product of the systemic inequities that have been in place since its inception. And we've just doubled down on those same networks. And I think, of course, there is clear direct bias that has happened. I hear these stories still every single day. So that's not gone. But the second piece is, as people have become more aware and have made progress, it is important to show the delta between where we were and where we are, so that people can imagine where we can go next.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad that we're going to talk about that. So coming back to the second, you gotta go. You're saying?
No, that is exactly what we're going to talk about next. So
that's exactly what I'm talking
about. Now you're burgeoning into like co-host level. This is awesome.
No, Rob, don't even let me in here. Get me out of here. So the second piece that I want to talk about is your question about why are so many women at the helm of these organizations that are solving for these externalities, right? And I would say it's interesting because I've been in this role several times now, not this specific role, but this kind of role. And I think what I've noticed from my own personal experience and other people that I've talked to is that often when you are the person who's having the lived experience that's challenging and the system that you're in is not solving for it for you, you have to both do the job well and solve the problem at the same time, which I will share with you, frankly, is really frustrating because you both have to do the job and do it really well and often twice as well to just get in the room. But then on top of it, you're also trying to solve for the challenge. And what comes to mind is an organization that I had the privilege of being part of called Accelerate prior to my time at Allraise. And working with that group of people, we were all founders at the same time trying to build our businesses. And I was pregnant with my first child at that time. And so it wasn't enough just for us to try and solve for our own companies. We were also trying to solve for our peers who were also struggling to figure out how to get access to capital or education or network or whatever to grow their businesses. And so when I think about Allraise and all the people, and even if you look at the Forbes cover and see the people who are featured there when we first announced what we're doing, they all have very full lives. They're all also doing a really hard job. And at the same time, on their nights and weekends, we're coming up with ideas and initiatives and shipping them so that they could help other folks inside of companies, get fair pay, not be harassed, get promoted. They could work with founders who said, hey, I will only work with a company that is interested or that has women decision makers at the table. So it's always interesting to me that when you think about the people who are solving these problems, they're often the ones in the industry who are trying to do the job really well, but realize in order for me to really get the job done and to continue to progress, and I want to see other people progress, I have to build something else to solve for this bigger systemic inequity. Yeah. So that's my reflection based on my experience and what I've seen. And I hope that we have a day when Allraise doesn't need to exist because we're solving for a gap. Right? Where maybe we're a professional organization that's helping people be successful. But that's not the world that we live in right now. So.
No, in fairness to you guys, and I'm going to reference your annual report, which I read. And I'm going to encourage everybody who's listening to go download this, if nothing else, to learn about the perspective of what's going on inside this industry. And if you're in the industry, like this annual report is so rich with information and insight. It's invaluable. And it tells us, and we kind of combine these next couple questions a little bit, because it tells us that we're now seeing like 17 to 20% of the decision makers inside of U.S. venture capital are women. And that wasn't the case. Like when kind of Allraise got in this game, I think it was like 8 or 9% or something like that, not that long ago. So you guys are making tremendous progress. But now, since you teased it, kind of the next part, right? Like, so what is next? And my underlying part of the what is next is like, okay, so do we now just expand upon that original goal? Do we reset the goalposts? Do we, as my dad used to say, like, instead of going, like, go deep and go wide instead of just like on the surface? And like, so how does the fact that we are making tremendous progress, albeit people would say, well, why isn't it 50% of okay, but that we've already discussed that. It's going to take us decades to get there. But like to go from 8 or 9% to 17 to 20%, like we're on that's an exponential trajectory of growth at the leadership level of these VC firms. So since you're having success, what does Allraise do now? Do we double down or do we adjust the goalposts?
So quick context on why we set the goal, where we set the goal, and then I'll talk you through where we are and where we're going. So we initially set this goal of doubling the percentage of women in partner plus roles, and we've since expanded that to women and non-binary folks to help increase the number of decision makers who were at the table in US-based VC firms. And when we first started, we were at 9%, and the goal was to double that to 18% in a decade. So from 2018 to 2028. And last year, according to our friends at PitchBook, we officially hit 18.6%, about 3 years ahead of schedule. And so because we, as I shared with you, we are big data-driven nerds here, we started to dig into this data to really understand what it meant. And then, of course, like you said, what do we do next? And we've learned some really important points that I want people to walk away with today. Number one is your title does not mean that you have power and influence. And I think that's for anybody in venture capital, but this is particularly important for women and non-binary folks as we've talked to them, because what we've realized is that you may have a title, but if you don't have power and influence, the deal flow that you're bringing in may not make it across the finish line. You may not be getting credit for your work. You may not be able to take that credit and use it to get a promotion or then go on and start your own firm or get hired somewhere else. And so what's really important is not just the number of people in the industry, but helping them get to a decision-making role where they have power and influence. And so we started looking at some initial data points there. And two that I'll call out is the percentage of AUM controlled by women and non-binary folks, which is something we're going to be studying and tracking moving forward. And then number two are the percentage of deals led by women and non-binary folks. And that data point, which is so interesting to me, if you think about that 18.6% representation, that's the number of people in partner plus roles, but then you compare it to the percentage of deals led by women, it's only 12.6%. Deals led by women. And then the question is, okay, so what kind of deals are led by women? Are they early stage? Are they late stage? Or what kind of companies? What's the quality of the company? What industry? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to continue to dig deep and give people a more nuanced view of what it means to have power and influence. And so that's a big piece of our next phase.
Hugely important.
It's huge. This is the part that I want people to understand. Rob, when I shared
data doesn't lie. I mean, it tells the story of like at every level that you want to go.
It does. And what's interesting is at our annual VC Summit, which is an incredible event where we host mostly senior women and non-binary VCs, and we have men in the room as well. We talked about this on stage. And when I shared that it is not enough to have the title if you don't have power and influence, I heard a sigh in the room.
Oh, wow.
Because people know it. But I think there are two things that I want to call out here. One piece is if we can have more power and influence inside of firms, there is an economic opportunity for the firm to bring in better deal flow, to bring in new deal flow, to access new networks. And I've heard that time and again from folks who have shared in our community, whether it is a man, a woman, or a non-binary person. Hey, when I added gender diversity to my team, I got access to networks and deal flow that I previously did not. And it was net positive for the team. Decision-making is better. And there's so much great data that backs this up. The second part that I really want to call out for us, though, is that it's not enough for people to have power and influence. It's really in an effort to help them put points on the board. So what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, we want to help all raisers get DPI. We want to help all raisers help their portfolio companies build their value. We want to help them go public. We want to help them get acquired. And then we want to tell the stories about those wins. Yes, the founders and the VCs and how working together, they were able to bring great value to their firm. And the reason that story is important, especially in this time, and Rob, I really appreciate you calling this out as we were preparing together, is that in this moment, it's not enough to have the data, because data is not as compelling as human-centered stories that help us pattern match against new versions of success that we might have otherwise missed. And so if we talk about community members, for example, when I think about companies that I'm so excited to see win, Maven Clinic is a great example. The CEO, Kate Ryder, and her team are just crushing it right now and doing really important work. And several all raisers have invested in that company. And I can't wait to see the story of how they work together with Kate to support her success and her
Right.
team's success to provide great value to their customers.
Yep.
I want to hear more of those stories.
And the data that you'll cull from that story
That's right.
will give you, and you, by the way, I didn't shout you out for the Shakespearean language choice earlier. The fact that you used the word lore in today's podcast is fascinating. No one speaks like that anymore, right? But like the data that you will pull out of the Maven story and having all raisers invested in the Maven story will feed the lore that you are then able to spin to the broader market to move the needle, right? Which is, we love to use these vague inspirational phrases, right? But what is moving the needle? That is actually just a metaphor for taking some point, some piece of data in this context, and wrapping up and compelling enough lore, to use your word, right, to convince people to take action, like to compel people to feel connected to something, to want to move forward, to want to change something, right? So yeah, that's that. I mean, you're preaching to the choir and me, but like you're telling an important story for all leaders who are thinking about, especially in this data-rich era that we live in.
Well, and I think how does data stick in our brain? It needs to be related to a memorable story. And I think stories about people are really important. And one story that came out last year that I loved hearing was Lauren Kolodny and Chime, and the impact that she had on that company as they went public, how people talked about her commitment, her conviction, and how that supported Chime's success. We need more of those stories. And what I've noticed is that if you think about the pop culture plus even industry publications, those stories, the stories about who is winning, are the ones that we're pattern matching against when we're making decisions around which companies we invest in next.
Yep.
And so the question is, as we consider the lore and all the characters in that lore and the wins and the journey and the dragons and the quests, because I'm a massive science fiction fantasy nerd as well, who are those people and how do we make sure that we are infusing it with richer, more diverse stories so people can see all the versions of success that are possible? And I I was trying to explain this to somebody, actually using comic book slides that I developed because I wanted to show like, these stories need to feel like this. They need to feel so easy to access that when somebody is on the phone, and this actually came out of our first strategy tour, the conversation that we are trying to incept or inject this lore into is the one where an investor calls another investor and says, yo, I'm looking at this company right now. They look amazing. They remind me of X.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of who do they remind you of, that analogy should include, again, somebody like Lauren.
Right.
And a company like Chime, just
Right.
as an
Yeah,
example.
as one example,
So yeah, but we need to make it that accessible, and I get excited about the opportunity to do that.
And again, excitement feeds off of accessibility to information, and information put in a story, right? I mean, it's 17 to 20% in a cold analysis is like, okay, that's cool, but like, what does that mean? Right. And then
that's exactly right.
The what does that mean in the context and the 50 years and that, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, there's a story there. So with that, boss, this is your chance to tell kind of a little bit of the commercial of All Raise. So you've already described in the beginning, it's a nonprofit kind of, that describes kind of what the business model is, but like, and without divulging anything private that you're not supposed to divulge, like, who are the benefactors? How is it funded? You told us the story, kind of what's going on right now. I always love to ask that kind of fantasy question, right? Like on the trajectory that it's on, funded and partnered with the people that you're partnered with, like, what do you see this looking like, 10 years from now kind of thing. But more so today, just how do people access it? Who are the people that are your clients, your users, your community members? Just kind of give us the commercial a little bit.
So Allraise is a national nonprofit that is focused on helping women and non-binary VCs get a seat, keep their seat, and be wildly successful. And the reason our work is so important is because we want to ensure that we have diversity in the venture side of the table so that the founders that are invested in and the solutions that they go on to build are reflective of our broader society, which I think is so mission critical during this time. I mean, if you look at some of the most impactful companies in our most recent history, they are venture backed. And that it impacts both the innovation, but then also the value in the private and then the public markets, which affects all of us. And so when I think about what All Raise's job to be done is, it's to help our community members get the knowledge and skills they need to be some of the best in the room. It is to build an incredible network with top VCs that include men, by the way, who can help them build out their knowledge, their network, their expertise, and share deal flow, co-invest in some of the best companies, go out and build their own firms, build relationships with LPs, and then get those LPs to invest in their firm. And so as you think over and over again about the opportunity for All Raise, first and foremost, it's about building that community that helps them be successful at their job. And again, at the end of the day, I'd love to be able to say that All Raise has helped our community members raise funds faster, access some of the best deals, fund some of the most important solutions in the country and in the world that are important for people and planet. And I think also to help us understand what success can look like and how diverse that success can be. And that is actually tied to the last two pieces of our work. And we like to think of this as a flywheel. Okay. That's data and lore. So for us, we are very focused on collecting data, not just on our community members, so we can understand what they need and their success, and then of course promote that, but also on what's happening in the market, and specifically what's happening for our community members, but also opportunities for our community members to continue to step into more and more opportunities. So one is we have this really great compensation survey that we run every year so that people can use that data to negotiate their compensation packages. I cannot tell you the number of people who use that or reach out to me personally to ask for that, which is great. Right. Yes, last year I believe we landed on around 750 people in the industry and a mix of genders. So we have some really good data there from folks who've been sharing it with us year over year. The second, of course, is our annual report. And so we're talking not just about what's happening for All Raisers, but we hear from LPs, we're hearing from men, women, non-binary folks, we're hearing from industry organizations. And it's a great way for us to tie together like what's happening in the industry right now. Then all of this is tied to lore, right? So when I think about our community and their wins and their lessons and their expertise and then the data that we're collecting, we leverage our platform to tell really powerful stories about what success can and can't look like, what does and doesn't look like, and how people got there, because that's another piece of this journey that's so important, especially as people enter the industry. They need to understand, like, what did it really take? And so with those three things together, you're going to see us out in the world is through our events, so our annual VC Summit, through our programs. We have cohorts and we have a VC Champions program that we run every single year. So peer mentorship and then mentorship with people further along in their career. You're going to hear from us using data. So our annual report, our VC compensation report, more to come there as we develop out our power and influence metric and study that more. And then finally, lore. So through our channels, through top publications, through incredible podcasts like this. And then in the future, we want to launch our own podcast, Rob, which you and I have talked about as well, right?
There's some rumors. There's some rumors around that.
There's some rumors that are really focused on great VC lessons and great tech lessons. And so it's going to be our community members, again, a mix of genders to really showcase what success can look like and how all raisers show up and are successful.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney & Company. You know, we all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney & Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney & Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey.
Let's talk about the boys, right? So
Let's do it.
everybody that knows me knows we're here in part because I'm such a loud, unapologetic male ally.
Right.
I was born this way. I'm a mama's boy, raised mostly by my sisters, and then became a girl dad. Right. So in that sense, I've been deeply committed to this for my entire existence. But talk about how you inside of Allraise approach those relationships with the men, with the male allies that are part of the community, that are adjacent to the community, that are supportive of what you're doing. So talk about how you approach those relationships and then why it's so important for kind of just all of us to take lessons away from how even organizations that are in this case focused on women and non-binary folks, still there is a place for men in this relationship matrix.
Absolutely. And I want to be very clear that while we are very focused on helping women and non-binary folks be successful, and that's because there is a gap that we're solving for in an effort to help firms be more successful, to help firms get better business outcomes, there's such an important place for men here. And we have so many incredible men who are involved as volunteers. So they're speaking at events. They are participating in programs. They're donors and they are sponsors. They are constant advocates for our work and great connectors as well. And so what's great to me is that we have so many spots for men to show up. And the few examples that are really important, number one is showing up as a mentor to somebody who wants to learn on their journey. I cannot tell you the number of men who've shown up and provided their mentorship, and then that has turned into impact, not only for the person that they've mentored, but also for them.
Sure.
And again, whether that's deal flow or a lesson they learned or something, a key takeaway that they were able to take back to their firm, it is a double-sided experience. Anybody who's been in a mentor-mentee relationship, I hope, has that experience. So that's one piece of it. The second is men have shown up as incredible volunteers on our board of directors. In fact, we added men this past year. We'll continue to add more men. We want to see men advise how we build out our community as well, because they're such an important part of venture capital, of course. And then the last piece that I'll share is as program participants. So coming because there's value. And actually our VC Summit is a great example of this. And I had this amazing conversation with a man who attended Summit for the first time, who was kind enough to share candidly that they were actually nervous when they showed up because they didn't know how to show up. And they didn't know as many people as they thought they would know. And they kind of didn't know how to engage. But once they got in the room, people really took them under their wing and they felt really connected and they were excited to be there. And they wanted to come back the next year as a speaker and participant again. And they're like, this is the first time I've ever felt like another in a room. And the only...
What a great lesson for that person to have taken away.
100% it was. I mean, I think it's hard to understand that if you've not been, and I think that can be the case for anybody if you are mainly hanging out with people who share your same identity. Going to the room and being an only can be very tough. And so I was so grateful that he was willing to share that. And then what was really cool is that he also got value out of that room. He's like, oh my gosh, I met such and such, such and such and such and such.
Of course.
That was so helpful. And since that conversation, I've had a few more that are similar, which was great.
That's awesome.
And so I want people to know that you are welcome here because we need you here. And we want great people who are committed to seeing more diversity in the industry. Yes, because we think it's the right thing to do, but also because it's good for business outcomes.
Good for the
and
economy.
you are welcome. So reach out and let us know how you want to get involved. And we'd love to see more men involved as we grow the organization.
I love that. One of the common refrains I hear in all the conversations, and I'm not even going to list the litany of women that you know, that I know, that we've had on the show before, who are all so deeply involved in this industry in different and attacking this problem or this gap, as you say, in so many different ways. But one of the common refrains, right, is that all of this trickles down from the limited partners or the institutional investors, right? And if they don't believe in the value of diversity and the VCs who manage their money, like, then those VCs aren't going to believe it. And so I'm curious, like, what is Allraise doing, if anything, to specifically focus on that, where the money starts, right? And trying to educate and inspire those folks to understand the economic win that diversity is.
Well, one of the reasons I was so excited for us to focus on women and non-binary VCs is because you can go up the capital stack then and ask, okay, what's happening with LPs? What are they seeing? What decisions are they making when it comes to how they invest by gender, if gender diversity is something that's important to them? And so there are three ways that we've been talking about working with LPs. We started last year, really. Number one is sharing data and really understanding from their perspective, what are they seeing when it comes to outcomes for gender diverse teams versus teams that aren't gender diverse? And what are the trends there? Number two is, what are you learning about LPs in the ecosystem, other LPs, and how they are making different investing decisions as they're more aware that gender diversity on teams gets better business outcomes? Does that change who they invest in or who they don't invest in? And I think what's complicated during this time is the macro climate in political and economic. And so as you think about, we have this wild time right now where LPs really want to get into some of the biggest funds and some of the biggest companies, especially with AI happening. And then at the same time, you have this DEI backlash that we really saw explode last year. And so I think that's what kind of makes it as complicated or make it complicated. And so as we kind of pull those pieces apart and help people understand that two things. One is I know LPs are thinking out further. And so how do they think
Okay.
about making investment decisions that are on the 100-year horizon and not like the, 5 to 10-year horizon? That depends on the LP that you work with. So anyway, let's go back to data as the first one. The second one is getting them involved as parts of our community. And so we started testing out some really great GP-LP events last year, which were awesome. And it's an opportunity for people to build relationships before they need to be transactional, but also be transactional. So we also brought together LPs and GPs at our annual VC Summit. We've done that for the last few years. And what's been really exciting is to hear stories of people who met there and then were able to get a commitment out of that conversation. And so that's part of the data that we'll continue to collect. The last piece that I think is really important, though, is also hearing from LPs. And this goes back to the lore piece. And so as you can see, these are all tying back to these pillars for us, right? Community, data, and lore. And for the lore piece is hearing from LPs themselves about what they're looking for and where the opportunities are and why they think having more women or more non-binary folks on a decision-making team is really good for business, and then backing that with data. So I think there's so much opportunity here, and part of our work this year will be talking to LPs, family offices, big institutions to understand how we can get them engaged and what we can do to help them also be successful.
You kind of teased him out already, and unintentionally or very intentionally. So two kind of more like tactical today questions, right? And one we can't avoid because I have to ask this no matter who I'm talking to, it seems like. But one, before we get to that one that's just a little bit more about something you said, right? So I read something in my prep and just recently over the holidays, I read it in a couple different places. It's something like 41% of all the VC invested in 2025 went into like 10 companies. And like that's insane to me, right? And so is that we're like I'm curious, this is now you get to be kind of the expert and tell me the insights from the industry. Like, is that a retrenchment of capital overall? Like, oh, there's less of it and it's just going to more concentrated places. And so we're going to squeeze out the space for future emerging fund managers and first-time fund managers? Or is that just this weird kind of hyper concentration in AI and this specific bubble that we're in right now? Like, what are you seeing, or what do you think?
I think it's a great opportunity for us to pull back and look at the asset class and ask what's happening. And so if you think, so there's a couple of things. So number one, I mean, the Wall Street Journal had a great piece on January 7th where they said that venture capital fundraising fell 35% as firms are staying private longer, right? Okay. So you have that dynamic, which is really important. I think you have AI, right? And these incredible companies that are going out and raising big rounds and massive valuations. And you're having that, of course, for all the name brand companies that we hear about and know about, but you're also having that for some of these smaller, earlier stage companies as well that people are competing for. So just a really bubbly time around AI as people are excited to get in and are trying to make decisions. And then, of course, there are the mega funds that are able to attract that capital, who have those LP relationships and those LPs who want to get in on what's happening with AI. So there's a lot going
Yeah.
on there. And then I think if you, I was just chatting with somebody yesterday, and I get a lot of anecdotal information as well, which is helpful, is that it is really tough for these smaller funds who are just
Right.
starting out, or even are just smaller funds, right?
Like is that money that's going into those mega funds, as you just described, like, is that going in there at the exclusion of like, oh, and we're just not going to invest in any other new emerging fund managers? Or is there still a distribution? It's just like they've ratioed it, so we're just going to invest less than these emerging fund managers.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that
Yeah.
question, but what I am hearing is that as LPs are thinking about the opportunity right now, and they see these big shots that they can take to get into some of the biggest companies in our generation, right? I'm hearing that folks are really excited to see that. And also, for the last few years, I've heard about how hard it is to raise as a as a fund manager. It's just hard to raise. And since I got here in 2022, people have been like, "Oh, I got to go out and raise. It's going to be really tough." So I have to say, I think it's been a challenging time overall to raise. I mean, people need liquidity. LPs need liquidity to go back out again. And if folks aren't getting that kind of liquidity, which has been tough over the last few years, it was great to see the hits of last year. And I want to see that continue. But the reality is, if you're not getting enough liquidity, you're not able to go back out and put that capital in the market, right?
Yeah,
and so,
I mean, it's funny, like not funny in a ha-ha way, funny in an interesting way, right? Like the reason I'm most fascinated by this actually is literally present with us in this show, because I think about our friends at Supply Chain Capital.
Supply Chain, that's right. That's right.
And I think about people like Nora May and Shayna, and I think to myself, like, are we in a world now where if this had been the set of conditions on the ground today, back when they were ambitiously trying to say, like, we're going to go do this, would they not have ever been able to get out of the garage? And therefore, are we squeezing out all of the perspective and, frankly, let's just be honest about them, like success that they're having with this first fund, right? But like, are we boxing out the current day, forget future, like Nora May's and Shayna's because of these market dynamics? It sounds like, yes, a little bit we are. But we don't know the permanence of that, because we're also admitting there's a bubble that's forcing this, which bubble implies it's going to burst at some point. And then does that money then go out looking for other new distribution places? Like,
well, and this is part of what we'll be looking at in our next annual report. And so hopefully I can come back and share with you a little bit about what we learned from last year. But what I will tell you, I've heard over and over again, is that for the women and non-binary folks in our network who are going out to raise, it is really tough to raise. They get a lot more questions and a lot of pushback. And I've heard from people who are like, well, the bucket I used to get money from, the woman bucket or DEI bucket, that's gone. I don't want money necessarily just from that bucket, because that bucket is at the whims of politics and of social movements. And so I want to be considered a great VC. And that's the thing, is I know our community members want to be considered great VC, of course, great VCs. And of course they're aware of their gender identity and proud of their identities. But at the end of the day, they just want to do their job really well. And so what I hear over and over again is that even going out with a track record, with brand names, it is still tough. In fact, there's one story, and I always say, I want to preface it with, there's one story, so we don't paint a broader brush. But this, I remember hearing from a woman who's going out to raise, who's raising at the exact same time as her husband.
Oh, wow.
And both the velocity, he was able to raise a lot faster than her, and also the amount that he was able to raise. And it's really frustrating when you've built an incredible track record and you still have a tough time doing this, and you get feedback that you should raise less money, or are you sure you want to do that? Or why don't you just go join another team? So I think there's that piece of it. I think the other part that's important for us to think about during this time is there's what's happening for women and non-binary folks. And there's, like you said, what's happening in the market, and how much capital is there even out there to deploy, and are they putting it into venture right now? And so I think those are the challenges that our community, that I've heard, are experiencing, and I'm looking forward to digging into more next year. Or this coming year.
I suspect the data and the lore that you'll be able to spend from it in that reporting will be hugely valuable, because again, like, we can talk aspirationally about all kinds of we wish, but the truth is a huge part of being optimistic for the future is pragmatically understanding the reality of what's going on today. Right. And then being very honest with each other about that, so that people can make better decisions. I have to ask you, we've talked about it a few different times, right? The politics of the moment moment, the politics that we live in right now. Is that literally like, are these forces that are literally like limiting your progress, or are the politics and the cultural kind of headwinds today that have shifted so dramatically from where they were just a few years ago? Are they limiting your progress, or are they almost even like holding down your ambition, or not?
Well, they're not affecting our ambition. I think Always was made for this very moment. I'm really so excited that we were born in the moment that we were. And I think we are made for this moment. And the reason why I feel that way is because in this time of backlash against initiatives that were really trying to explain the importance of giving people an opportunity to work and to show up and to be successful, to be promoted at the same rates, to be capitalized in the same way as folks who have an identity that aligns with the majority in an industry. It was really an effort to say, hey, we want to be part of this too. We want to be part of growing the economic pie for everybody. And the data is good about that when you have diversity in a decision-making room, you can get better outcomes. That is very clear. And there's so many great data points about that. And as you and I were talking today, I was just thinking about some of them that we haven't had a chance to talk about. And I just want to list them off, because every time somebody's like, there's great data, I'm like, what's the data?
Yeah.
So we know that according to Harvard Kennedy School, VC firms that hire just 10% more female investing partners see 1.5% higher fund returns and nearly 10% more profitable exits.
Boom.
We know organizations with 30% women in management achieve higher return on equity, better valuations, and stronger stock preference. We also know that a lack of diversity correlates with roughly 20% lower investment performance across a data set of virtually all venture deals from 1990 to 2016. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more to share. And so in this moment, when there are headlines about how DEI is dangerous, how it is bad for business, our opportunity is to not just lean into the data, it's to produce new data to continue to underscore this and to tell stories that help show that this isn't in an effort to be exclusive. Right. It's in an effort to be inclusive in a way that helps us get better business outcomes. Yeah. And I am so hyped about the work that we get to do now. So it doesn't affect our ambition. The reality is that over the past couple of years, and we really saw this happen with the Fearless Fund lawsuit, it does cause people to feel like there is a risk in doing this kind of work. And so what I think we saw sifted out last year were the people who had tied their lessons about leveraging diversity in a business environment to outcomes, and those who maybe had not. And so it was, I think, easier to cut back and withdraw because they weren't able to say, oh my gosh, we can't stop that. That affects our bottom line. And I think about the way that Costco really stood up and had some great data to support the reason why they were continuing to invest in that for their business. And so I think last year was a really tricky year as we saw an executive order related to this. And then as we saw people nervous about the risk there. And then there's funding that went away as a result of that, right? And that's okay. I think what the opportunity is now is we've continued to lean into partners who are like, we can see it's good for business. We're excited about this. And our job is to, again, continue to highlight the stories and the data that prove why this work is good for business, not just today, but for decades to come. Yeah, I think disappointing. But exciting.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, it's, of course, like the whole, everything that we're going through right now, the universal phrase I use all the time is, this is just horribly unnecessary.
The general just gesturing.
Yeah, I mean, this is just all unnecessary, right? So it's unfortunate, as you say, it's disappointing. Like, it's just unnecessary. But it is the reality that we're all operating in. And so we have to understand it. And I love the truth. And there's been other great reporting on this that quietly you start to see from credible sources kind of emerging, which is telling the story that, like, yeah, there were a lot, as you would say, maybe even some extrajudicial brands that were just trying to get the halo effect, right, of that work, but they weren't really meaningfully committed to the work. And now you peel it back and you see that there are like thousands and thousands of the biggest brands, the most leading organizations in the world, who have just basically said, oh, we're going to keep doing what we've always been doing. We're just going to quit talking about it.
We're just going to quit talking about it. We're just going to do the work.
We're going to put out fewer press releases about it so that we don't do the work. Well, for whatever reason, draw the attention, get the ire. Like what we're just going to quietly go about the work, as opposed to do the work and promote that we were doing the work.
And Rob, it's not, I just want to be clear that I think the language, the spirit of the work here is to be more inclusive in an effort to help grow the pie.
Which translate that
right?
to the broader audience who aren't venture capitalists that are listening, which means grow the economy. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io.
Grow the economy. We want to grow economic opportunity for people, right? We want to make sure
everybody.
For everybody. It's not exactly. We want to have, when we bring in gender diversity in the room, we're bringing in other kinds of diversity as well. And for me, as a human being who thinks about all the opportunity that we have to learn from people who don't look like us or have a different lived experience, and how that can help make your business more resilient, how it can make it more capital efficient, how it can help you identify new markets and customers that you might not have otherwise seen. I really want to double down that this is not in an effort to be decisive or divisive.
Nope.
It's in an effort to be inclusive
and
to help people understand the opportunity and make progress. Yeah. And
this is
I think
progress.
Yeah, that's right. And Rob, in this moment, I think what's really exciting is to bring people close and to have those difficult conversations and say, look, I know that you think this is the way that it has been, but there is opportunity, and I want to talk to you as a person about that. And I think that's Rob, what I love about the community that you've built and that you call it alumni is that the more relational we can be with people to have these kind of conversations, everyday people who generally want to do right by each other and their families and their community, hey, look, we've heard a bunch of buzzwords. We've seen a bunch of headlines. Let's talk and have a conversation about what this actually means. And I get really hyped about that, actually.
I love that. That's why you're fun to have on the show today.
Rob, too excited.
Last couple questions before we get to our closing segment.
Yes.
And these next two are a little more personal. This is a little bit more about Paige, since we've covered the industry. We've talked all riz. We've talked about the macroeconomic environment. There's again, very few people, probably not a lot. I might be naming the only two in the world of private capital who have taught fourth graders or have taught sixth graders like Kiana Patterson did down here in LA. Like
Kiana, of course
you taught fourth graders. She taught sixth graders. You may be the only two former school teacher people in the world that do this now. Like what human lessons have endured throughout your career from being in a classroom of fourth graders or like Kiana with sixth graders in LAUSD to now being in boardrooms? Like you're still teaching and inspiring. So I'm really curious, are there lessons that you apply? Because I suspect there are. What are they?
Well, first, let me say there's actually a lot of teachers.
Are there? Okay. All right.
Yeah, there
Awesome.
are. And either current teachers who are out teaching in colleges or even high schools on the side, or they have gone from teaching into venture. And I can think of three. I've not asked for their permission to share, but I'm just thinking of those people at the top of my brain.
We won't out them on the show. That's okay.
We'll call. I need to double. I'm like, when did you teach? What do you teach? So anyway, but what I'll say is, I think the reason why having that skill set is so important as you step into a space like venture is that it helps you continue to feed your curiosity. I think also anybody who is a great leader, and this is something that I aspire to be a great leader, it is always a work in progress and what I want, is somebody who is a great teacher. And being a great teacher means that you're humble. There's nothing, I think I just said this to somebody the other day. There is nothing more humbling than standing in front of a group of fourth and fifth graders
Right.
who do not care about your resume, your GPA. Like, who cares? I don't care. And that was incredibly humbling, especially having left college and definitely being the kind of student who wanted gold stars and wanted to get a great GPA. I think the second part of it is continuous improvement. And I was a Teach for America Core member, so we had a lot of rigor around tracking outcomes and making sure that we were always getting better for our students, with our students. And I think that when you consider continuous improvement in the context of venture capital, it is constantly learning, like, okay, well, how can I get better at spotting the best companies and spotting great talent and sourcing the resources that my portfolio companies need, or being a great teammate inside of my firm, or building a great firm and attracting great talent. You have to be self-reflective and ask, where are my gaps? Where are my strengths? Where can I get better? And it's something that I'm really grateful in this job is that has been codified. And I'm calling out our incredible board chair, Aileen Lee, because she spends a lot of time with me, not only helping me reflect on my behavior, but also reflecting on her own behavior and how we can get better together in our relationship. And that kind of leadership is really important. And then the last piece of it that I love is just like, teaching feels like an adventure.
Every day.
Every single day, right? Because you have this classroom of people with different feelings, different worlds that they come from, different experiences. And your job is to gather them together. And you're on this journey, whether it's through a school year or semester or whatever. And so if you think about learning in a classroom, and then if you think about venture as an adventure, then it's like this big quest where you're going to have good days, you're going to have tough days, good moments, bad moments. And it's about kind of you keep going on the journey, right? You can't stop on the journey. And so I think being a teacher made me, I think, the right person for this role, and will affect me for the rest of my life, because it does help me stay humble. It helps me constantly think about how I can get better. And then I try to treat life like an adventure. And it's more fun, I think, even when it's really hard.
I've said this oftentimes, that the most people would, like, that was a great leadership lesson, or thanks for that mentorship, Rob, or wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. And they attribute it to like some magical career experiences that I accumulated over the course of my life. And most oftentimes, especially in this last 25 years of my life and raising my daughter, I just attribute it to parenting, right? I'm like, I learned most of the lessons that I'm like, from, when I was in my mid 30s to mid 40s and I was raising her as a pre-teenager and a teenage girl, I'm like, most of me from like 45 to 57 now is just like me sharing lessons that I picked up by figuring out how to like both help her succeed and not screw her up.
No, help her succeed and not screw her up is the funniest and simplest and most beautiful way of explaining parenting.
I mean, that's literally and I sit here now as a grandpa, and so I have a different relationship with her at 32 years old, and now I get to shift and be, I'm her number one fan as her dad.
Yeah.
Right. So you go from like, my job was to like make sure she stayed alive, to then
that's right.
make sure she made good decisions, make sure she still had options. And that's basically just business leadership. Like, and what you say, and I say this to validate you mostly, because what you're presenting as takeaways, and you are a parent, but also as takeaways from the classroom of fourth graders into your professional life now, is essentially saying, hey, good business leadership, good community building inside of the business of business, which is what venture capital loves to promote and tell itself, is like, we're the most important part of the business world, right? Is like not that serious. It's actually just human compassion and empathy and curiosity and love and leadership and joy and failure and humility to admit our mistakes and growth, like you and Elaine. And like that, it's just human. The best parts of everything you've described today is human. Right. So there's a takeaway for everybody, no matter what you're doing, wherever you're leading, like, find your humanity and you will find it easier to probably do your job.
The part you're going to mess up, expect that you're going to mess up.
Yeah.
Like that piece of it. And I think that gets woven into continuous improvement. I cannot tell you the number of times I've read about failure and how important it is, but how awful it feels while you're in it. And I think the part of continuous improvement is like, you are going to fail. Sometimes it means you have to apologize. Sometimes that means you need to say, well, I got to reset on that. Obviously, that didn't work. and get better. And I think that's all very human. I think
Yeah.
we're humaning when we're out there just trying our best.
Exactly.
It doesn't
Every day,
always
every day,
work.
every day, no matter the format. All right. Last question before we get to our
Ask.
closing segment question.
Okay.
I'm just curious. We painted a very pragmatic, but I'll call it pragmatic, optimistic view of things and the potential of the industry, the potential of the economy, et cetera. Is there anything that worries you about the venture industry today or where it's headed?
Well, what I really want to make sure that we do, specifically at All Raise, is that as we think about growing representation in venture, that we're also changing the culture so that it actually is a better place to work. And I think that was a big part of the catalyst, right, for All Raise in the very early days, was that this was not a place that was attracting and supporting the success of women and non-binary VCs in the way that the people who started our work knew it could. And hey, we want to make this better. And that's why I said to you before, it's important to remember where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Because especially in times when of constriction or challenge, it feels like that big dream just beyond the horizon feels like it's not possible. And so what I want All Raise to be able to do is, as we are changing the composition of the industry in a way that helps other people be successful, I also want us to change the culture so it's a place that is more likely to promote people and retain people. And examples of that we hear a lot about are having, parental leave policies, or having policies that help people continue to get promoted as they take into context things like parental leave. Environments where people are getting direct feedback frequently about how they can grow in their role, and then have transparent paths to promotion. I think it looks like also being mindful about how bias can prevent you from hiring the best talent or investing in the best talent. And so I think just like any industry, there's an opportunity as we change the composition to change the culture of the industry so that it continues to add net positive again to people and planet. And so that's what's really important to me. What I get excited about our work,
The subtext there is like, culture, either as it was or as it is or as it isn't evolving fast enough, that's a worry. Like the worry would be that the culture doesn't evolve with the addition of the people. Right.
It's not enough just to change the people. We also have to change the culture.
Not enough to just give the title without the empowerment. I feel like someone said that in the last hour.
Yeah, that's right. That's
last question, and this is for the aspirational young VC or like person who wants to get into VC, the young woman that's at a university somewhere. They listen to this episode. They have a friend that's in VC, right? But they don't feel like they're ready or qualified to apply for that job in VC. Or ask for that promotion in the firm where they already work. So what would be, this is kind of more of an actionable bullet point answer, which, by the way, you are a queen of bullet points because you've given great bullet points all day today.
Thanks, Rob.
Which is fantastic. Right. So Deanna's going to love that when it comes to post-promotion clips of the show, because it's going to be like, man, she was just giving us all the bullet points. So this bullet point question is just like all the others you've answered so far. What are 2 or 3 moves or decisions that person can take in the next 90 days to either position themselves to be prepared, to be ready to apply for that job, or to be prepared and confident to go into that partner's office and ask for that promotion? What do they need to do? The next 2 or 3 things they need to do to focus on?
I think start first with what you want and what you need in your career. And so as you think about your next steps, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to go deeper into a specific vertical? Are you trying to leap into a new role because you want to continue to grow, whether it's from principal to partner to GP? What do you want? Get really clear about that first. And I think that is actually for entrepreneurs, that was my biggest lesson as an entrepreneur. And I didn't realize how much I wasn't leading with what I wanted when I built my business. And I think, and this is a lesson I'm now applying to my career, what do I want? And then once you know what you want, and let me just say around that, when I'm trying to crystallize what I want, I, in the past, spent a lot of time talking to other people. I think that's helpful, but you also need to spend some time with yourself. What do you want? What does that voice say you want? So get that clear. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it out. The next is get the data. So for example, if you want to go have a conversation about a promotion, what does the data tell you about what you should be getting paid for that role? What have you done for that promotion? What do you bring to the table once you are promoted? Bring your receipts with you, and then also talk about what's happening in the industry and how that applies to your promotion and how you use that data to make decisions. I think also get the data about your firm and talk to other people in the firm about how they've approached that conversation. And I've heard this increasingly, and outside of your firm. So gathering a community of people. And I just had this conversation with someone this week who was saying, I have a big decision to make about what I'm going to do next with my firm. And what I've done is I've leveraged in our case, our All Raise VC cohort to talk with other people who've been through this experience, or ask them to connect me with somebody who has done that as well.
Fantastic.
And so
those are three hugely valuable tips.
Huge, right? And so, get the help, get the data, get clear about what you need, and then go for it.
Love it. This has been a pleasure. It is a rare opportunity for me as the host of the show to have had the opportunity to have like a 90-minute conversation with you 9 months ago, when I basically just entertained you while you sat in the airport waiting for your flight home. And
we had the best conversation.
And you had
it was
nothing else to do, and you were like, "I'll talk to this guy." If Megan says I should talk to this guy, and it was like we were like best buddies by the time the conversation was over. So it's rare that I get to have that kind of insight and affinity for someone before they get on the show. But I got to admit, it also then did make me like very eager to have this conversation on the show.
Thanks,
so I'm really grateful for your time today. I know you're very busy, although it's a Friday when we're recording. You've still got a lot to do before you go home on the weekend.
Always, Rob, always.
So yeah, no, thank you. It's been awesome. Thank you for educating us about All Raise, but also about the industry, about the reality of the positive impact that diversifying this specific small asset class in our vast economy actually has when it comes to growing our economy, right? Because the spill down effects from growing our economy means those VCs have greater returns, means they have more capital to distribute to more entrepreneurs, which means more entrepreneurs pattern match against other entrepreneurs that look like those success cases that came out of the All Raise communities. Like we talk about Shine, we talk about Maven, we talk about the All Raisers that have invested. Like it all literally is, as you say so beautifully, kind of this mosaic of reality, data, facts, truths, and wrapped into lore of great stories, which all great stories are ultimately just human characters on a journey. So it's been a pleasure to share this with you. I'm so grateful for your time.
Same, Rob. Thanks for having me. And if anybody's interested in learning more, come to allraise.org. We're, as I shared earlier, we're a nonprofit. We're fundraising right now, which is important. And we rely upon incredible partners who fund us through grants or donations or through sponsorships. So
love that. Is there, for anybody that wants to find you, connect with you, is there ways that they can find you online?
Yes, I'm at Paige H. Buckner in all the places on social media.
Not Paige Speakers from the WNBA.
No, but listen, I will take that as a compliment. Every time that happens, I'm like, excuse me, yes, please. We are the same. We're the same. We're the same. Though I definitely didn't play basketball. I played a mean French horn. So
there we go. That's okay. And she would be, honestly, she'd be lucky to know you as well. So it's all good.
I know she'd crush French horn too. So I'm going to celebrate.
I also suspect she'd crush being an investor part of the community at All Raise.
100%. Yes.
We may just sag the WNBA in this episode. No, this is terrific. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you so much. I'm grateful for you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.